see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
So I'm Edwin Rutsch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and today I'm here with Ira, what's your last name pronounced?
Liss. Ira Liss.
Ira Liss. Yep. And you and I, or Ira, you applied on the Ashoka Activating Empathy. You kind of submitted a proposal there for their contest. And this contest is about empathy and how we can foster empathy in the schools. And that's kind of how we met. And can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Like you have a game or something that you do on?
My initial background, or more recent background prior to launching AOK, was Hollywood. I'm a producer and talent manager for actors. But I consulted for a social experiment about 2.5 years ago, and the social experiment was designed to identify what would happen if people were given tools in the form of a flip camera, which at the time Flip was still in business, and some cash, a small amount of cash, about $250. And it came in a neat little branded box, and we were just utterly, totally inspired by what came back, what kind of content came back. It was 95% selfless, very philanthropic, very thoughtful content. And it got us thinking about what we can do to scale that model up in another way. And at the time when I was consulting for them, I met with Adrian Grenier, the actor from Entourage, because what we were looking to do was bring that platform, the old platform, to celebrities as a possible way to get their fans around video upload and content and sharing around positive social action. Well, anyway, long story short, at the time Foursquare was coming up, it was becoming a very popular site, and gaming was becoming very popular, and we just felt like we could integrate some of the tools that are very popular on Facebook and Twitter and Foursquare to incentivize people to share their acts and observations of kindness, positive social action.
So the kindness kind of relates to empathy.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. Like part of our mission statement is that we want to increase societal mindfulness, and I think that we're all in kind of like the same bullseye here when we talk about mindfulness and when we talk about empathy and when we talk about kindness. They're all very, very related. And one of the things that I noticed as occurred once people start to play the AOK game is that they become more mindful, and as a result of becoming more mindful, become more empathetic. And there's a pretty interesting connection that I've seen occur where I just think that once you become more aware of your surroundings, you're more capable of identifying how someone else might be responding to the exact same circumstances that you're seeing. And you would necessarily identify that you are not unlike anyone else that's outside of your world. And it gives you a chance to be empathetic towards their perspective.
Well, the kind of area that I'm coming from is around empathy. So I have the website Culture of Empathy, and looking at how do we change society so we can raise the level of empathy within society. And right. I call that a culture of empathy, just as a little catch, phrase. But so how are you seeing kind of ways that we can go about raising the value of empathy within society, and how does your game kind of contribute to that?
I think a lot of it happens, and this is why I'm so excited about the Ashoka Empathy Challenge, is that it's specifically designed to incite empathy in the school systems. And I think a lot of this can really happen at the school level. It's not a coincidence that along with STEM education, there's currently emotional intelligence being taught in the school systems as well. And I think that these are in many respects responses to social phenomenon that are not only positive, but some of which are negative. On the positive side, what we've seen is people are becoming more proactive to share empathy. They're being more proactive to share declarations of positive social action. And on the negative side, we've seen people are getting more and more intolerant of bullying. And I think that those things go hand in hand in terms of how schools could address social education, how they can address emotional intelligence education. And so when we talk about how we can create a culture of empathy, I think that for one thing, it happens in a slow, deliberate way. And the more we include it in the school systems, the more we're going to be graduating a whole other generation of people that are already trained to understand what empathy is.
So it's the first thing to build a culture of empathy. Perhaps number one is to change the schools so that the schools are teaching empathy and kind of fostering it there.
Exactly, and the ways to do this, in our opinion, at AOK, are on, I would say, on the the cutting edge of what I think education is trying to do now. We've consulted with a number of organizations who are looking to bring new models of education to a system that's been around for 200-300 years. The didactic method is something that probably could use a little bit of a revamp to its method, that we could probably look to the technology of the era that kids are embracing and make more use of them instead of shuttering them out from the school system. And so, we're familiar with an organization called Game Desk that is designing modules that are designed to bring games that also educate. And they also educate emotional intelligence as well. And they're really cool games with avatar-based, and that's their model. What we do at AOK is we make the experience of sharing and doing these positive acts and displays of empathy something that people will do that's fun and is a little bit cooler than just your typical community service, which is fine. But I think in order to really get larger populations of people to embrace it, they need to find the fun factor.
Yeah, so right now we have the fun factor around games is kind of shoot 'em up, blow up heads, and all that kind of stuff. So you're kind of saying we need games that kind of foster empathy in some way, which...
Exactly, and that's actually... Oh. We made a very conscious decision to not have a single, what's called the first-person shooter game or first-person game. What we chose to do was embrace some of the social networking that people really do seem to be gravitating towards for validation. This is where we're like Facebook. In ways that people like to follow other people who are role models, that's where we're like Twitter. We have some functionality that's not unlike Twitter. And in the ways that people like to get rewarded with things like badges or virtual rewards, or in our case, not only do we do that, we also take the points that people have earned and convert them into donations to causes. Then that's how we're like Foursquare. So we're kind of, it's a flat site insofar as there are no avatars, and it's game elements. So it's the fun part of it doesn't really nod at all to some of the more, I think, detrimental towards empathy games.
So we have the first idea then for building a culture of empathy is change the schools so that the empathy is taught in the schools. And then it's using the social technology, social mediums, games to kind of build in empathy training into that. And it sounds like you're saying within the game that you're working on, it's like you have kind of, it's like, okay, become more empathic step by step and gain rewards kind of along the way. Is that?
Yes. So, the thinking is, we did a lot of research around psychologies of reward and psychologies of social validation. And we met with a doctorate of neuroscience, and we met with an organization called Natron Baxter, who's partnered with Jane McGonigal, who's one of the TED speakers about gaming. And we were really very, very deliberate and took a great deal of time and care to make sure that the kinds of rewards we were doing were going to be organic to the experience of being empathetic, to being kind. And it was very important that we weren't rewarding people with things like designer jeans or things that just didn't feel like they were part of the experience of doing something positively social. So the kinds of rewards that we tend to prioritize are things like the power to donate to charities or relief efforts. And so a person can then take their points, and those points will become donations to causes that they otherwise may not have had the money to do. And we also provide what are called intrinsic rewards as opposed to extrinsic rewards, which are more of like the hard, real-world type of prizes. The intrinsic rewards are all about social validation and the kinds of things that people feel good about. And, I mean, there's just to get a little bit off topic, I hope it's okay if we do it.
Wander wherever. I tend to go in all kinds. I just follow the thread, so feel free to follow the thread.
So there's a, there was an NPR piece that occurred in April of last year, speaking to a social phenomenon that's occurring today with the advent of more green-based priorities at the brand level, and with the popularity of green merchandise and technology. And what they determined was that whereas there was such a thing as called conspicuous consumerism, which was best summed up in the 80s and prior to that by the phrase keeping up with the Joneses. The popularity of things like the Prius and solar technology has revealed that people want to show their contribution to society in a positive way, and it's coined a new phrase. It's called conspicuous conservationism. And what that now does is that what they've observed is that whereas someone would get a solar panel to install in their house and be as green as you can be with solar technology, what they're doing is they're installing it on the front of their house, whether or not that's the place where the sun is hitting the panels the most. Similarly, like the Prius is a car that is just as good, if not, maybe even inferior to other electric or hybrid cars. But because it's so clearly the technology, just by the way it looks, it's the highest selling of the hybrid cars. And the reason why I bring that up is that that type of a newfound social pressure, and I don't like to use the word pressure, but we really do measure ourselves in terms of what is becoming more acceptable. And yet another little tangent to tell you about is that when I used to work with Jeff Goldblum, he told the story on Conan O'Brien about when he was a young kid in the 50s, he and his parents would go to get McDonald's and they would eat in the car, then they'd take the trash and throw it out the window. This is just hardly acceptable behavior anymore. And the evolution of that type of social trend is something that we're witnessing now in so many different areas. It's only 7 years ago that people still leave trash in the movie theaters. No one does that anymore. So this type of a mindfulness translates, I think, into, I guess something that I'm coining, or a phrase that I like to say is that we're going to call it something like an emotional spell checker. So that you have a moment where what we're trying to do is create a device, a way that people will become just a little bit more capable of seeing the other person's perspective before taking an action. And that's the mindfulness that we're talking about. And that's the part that lends itself to the empathy that we hope to see.
Well, I mean, I hear a lot of stories about people who, you walk into a room and you can feel the dynamics of what that room is like, kind of the emotional dynamics. For example, if somebody is kind of like demeaning someone else, or is someone seeing someone as the fall guy. So you walk into an environment and it's like we kind of adapt to that environment, to those rules. And it's kind of like you're saying, well, we have to change that dynamic. So when you walk into the room and the space, we see that empathy is the paradigm, the cultural, emotional value that's valued within this community and supported. And so somehow we have to create that environment.
And I think that that's already happening. And I think that it's wonderful when you see pop culture taking a lead role in things like bully awareness campaigns, where it's now becoming, it's not cool to be the bully. And it used to be that kids competed with each other in ways that I think was really destructive. Now, maybe it was part of an old paradigm for how human beings learn to create identity. But I think that that's actually not necessarily the way it has to be. And I also think that, we're all in some respects, this is going to sound a little bit sophomoric, but I think we're all in some respects still children, in that it's very difficult. I don't know if you know the phrase parallel play. When you're talking about a toddler, that's the very first stage of what it means to actually be social with other people, but you don't necessarily understand their point of view. And when these kids play together, they're not playing really with each other. They're playing alone in the same company. Similarly, as we evolve, I think that we become more capable of being aware of our imprint in a room, or aware of our impact in our actions, the consequences. We see the results of our actions. And I think that that's just evolving. I think we're evolving to a place where we're becoming much more capable of recognizing how our actions are affecting other people, so much so that the aggressive acts that used to be condoned are really becoming quite condemned.
Well, I hear a lot of people talk about it, how we adapt to what our leaders are doing. Like if there's social leaders that they're acting a certain way, we kind of tend to follow their model. And if we look at kind of the political, social level with the demeaning and the name calling and the criticism and all that, I mean, it doesn't look too hopeful in terms.
Yeah,
I'm seeing two different realities here.
Yeah, there is some struggles there. I think that there's a bit of a I don't know that it's a hypocrisy, but when we look at what the political system's like and the fact that and this is maybe even another radical suggestion that I think we're so not prepared to do, but I really think that one of the ways that this social structure will evolve, and we already know that it has, because look at the way that the Arab Spring changed the Middle East. Again, embracing social networking technology in such a way that they were willing to upend their political system. They were willing to upend dictators. Similarly, I think that we've been embracing democracy for so long, and it's the best system that is probably out there. However, because of technology and because of the way that leaders now do pursue their jobs, we've kind of learned how to game the system. And I think that politicians, it's now one of those things where the ends are really now driving the means. I'm sorry, yes, the ends are driving the means in such a way that it is destructive. When a politician needs to go get a job and their livelihood depends on that, and maybe even a little bit of their ego about what it means to be powerful depends on them going through a campaigning process every 4 years that requires that they get out in front of the media and explain why it is that the opposition is failing you, the American people. Well, that's a destructive process, and I think that we really need to take a hard look at whether or not there's a version of democracy or a version of government that might be worth exploring. We did do it in 1776, and we did change our government, and I think that we will evolve to a place where some of those new perspectives on government may in fact work. I mean, if there was some way to do a volunteer version of politics where the individuals that ran for office were still incentivized to be talented and capable, that would be an attractive way to do it instead of having to make it be something that is such a extrinsically rewarded system.
Well, that's one thing I like to look at or kind of ask about is what does that world look like, right? That culture of empathy. I mean, what does the, what's the ambiance, the vibes, what would that, a vision, a national, international culture of empathy look like to you?
To me, I guess that in part because I've created a social business and we're not a nonprofit, we are still ambitious to become sustainable and to become a money-making enterprise. I guess that I envision that this culture of empathy is one in which we are all still very ambitious. We are still, still pursuing whatever it is that is most important to us, but that there is a analysis that gets done where my actions, where if I'm going to cause pain and strife to other people as a result of these actions, then it's probably not the right action, because I just believe that success can be achieved by doing the right thing by everybody. And so the vibe that I'm thinking it is that it's not necessarily this isn't your grandpa's empathy. This is, this isn't it's not we're all going to be hugging each other all the time. It's not that. We all have our inner circle of people that we need to look out for, and I just hope that circle gets a little bit bigger as we start to recognize that we're all human beings on this planet at the same time. It's a wonder that we should all be looking each other in the eye and saying, isn't it great that we're all alive on this planet at the same time? I mean, it's a pretty great thing, but I don't know that I see it as being everyone hugging everyone all the time.
So it's kind of like an ambitious empathy.
Yeah, that's not a yeah. Well, we do have to still, put food on the table for, we haven't yet found a system of government that allows us to get food on the table without people actually pursuing what it takes to get that food on the table. So, I mean, there really is still a need for people to be incentivized to excel. And that's also in part what I think technology does for us too. So in order to be able to get to a place where people are still incentivized, some version of a government system that still embraces ambition is probably necessary.
Well, when you say ambition, I think you're meaning competition. So it sounds like you're trying to find some sort of a balance or integration between competition and empathy.
Yeah, that's hard, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I've especially when I consider what it was like when I was a kid, before I wound up getting to a place where I identified what things I did well. I think our connection's getting a little bit funky, but can you still hear me?
I hear you fine.
All right, the picture's a little bit delayed. You know, it's a funny thing. Like, there was a time when I remember being in grade school, and I always felt like competing and then winning and having the people that you cared for not winning just felt bad. It kind of did feel a little bit bad. It's a tricky thing because, you know, you have to just accept the fact that not everybody wins all the time, and everyone has potentially a moment in the sun to win. That is tricky.
Yeah, so that's something we need to explore then, maybe
Yeah.
in a panel discussion or something, is what's the relationship of competition and empathy, and how do the two merge? Because it seems like you're kind of saying that the competition is this force that's getting people to work hard and create stuff and be innovative, and we need that for, you know, productivity and all that kind of stuff, but we can't.
Yeah.
And so what is that relationship? And sometimes I think of our current competitive system as being nuclear fission, where things break apart. When atoms break apart, there's an energy released.
Yeah.
But the problem is we have nuclear waste. You know, we've got all these kind of, and in societal we have animosity, you know, resentment, and all these things from this fission, which we see in the political system.
Yeah.
And then there's nuclear fusion.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the atoms coming together and bonding so that they become kind of like unified, and there's energy released from that. And it's kind of like a cleaner energy with less, you know, all this waste. So I kind of use that metaphor for, you know, empathy. I see as that fusion.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't propose to be I'm still exploring this whole kind of notion, you know, of
I don't know that all the answers are actually here yet, but I think that it's wonderful that there are places where people, and more places where people are opening up to have these conversations candidly, and that it's even being had, and that it's being it's popular. It's becoming more and more popular to talk about people's feelings and whether or not they should factor into business, and whether or not taking care of your employees in a way that, you know, they never have been. And the fact that people now, I think that the statistic is it's 90% of all consumers surveyed said that they want their brands to do something that's socially mindful, socially impactful, community awareness, community raising. And with that kind of a trend that we are now expecting business to not only be about commerce, but to be about the health of people and the health of our environment, people are really starting to take a harder look at and I think it's about doing harder work is what it is. I think that it's about saying, you know what, we can make this widget and we can make it as efficiently as possible, and there will be radioactive waste. But if we work harder, we can figure out that technology, which is the fusion. And I'm, you know, reminded of a call that I just did today with an organization that we're exploring a partnership with called Let's Do It World. And they did an enormous job about 5 years ago in Estonia, where there was a park that had been dumped on for more than a decade. And it just became acceptable at a point in time to throw your trash into this beautiful park in Estonia. And an organization at the time, they were called Let's Do It Estonia, managed to leverage the technologies of that era, which was, there was some mobile technology involved, to map where all the trash was, create a groundswell interest in getting as many volunteers as possible to show up on one day. And then with all the interest that occurred, there was celebrity backing, but to do the work of what it would have taken the government $30 million in the course of months to do, these 50,000 people showed up and actually did clean up this entire park in one day. And it's an incredible video that you could see on YouTube. Well, their success has now given them quite a bit of limelight in terms of what they can do with a community and with an area. And there are other organizations that I'm aware of that are consulting with them to do the same thing for their countries or their communities. And what's wonderful about what they've now done is that they recognize in the course of their work, this is where you have to do the extra work. They now learn that they pick up the trash and it gets taken to whatever typical sanitation areas that there are. And that means it's either going to go out to the ocean or it's going to be piled on a landfill. And so they're now consulting with organizations that are about oceans' health in order to make sure that these actions that they're now creating, all of this terrific, wonderful energy that is being created, is not going to wind up resulting in a bunch of garbage in the ocean. So it's a high priority of theirs, and you can see that that's the kind of thinking that I think is becoming more and more popular, where people are actually pushing the envelope on what's required to do the best by whatever the mission is.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're seeing society moving more towards empathy and social good and caring for each other, and that you're wanting to support that effort in your work.
I think so. Mm-hmm. I think just the fact that even you have this show right now is an example of the kind of popularity around this issue. I think that you know, things like this, you just didn't get. You didn't get opportunities to have a whole community come around something like empathy 5 years ago, unless you started 5 years ago.
Yeah, I started about 4 years ago, so okay. But not with this part. This is pretty new. Doing the video, you know, the technology is just kind of getting there. You know, we talked about the metaphors of the nuclear fission and fusion. Do you have a metaphor of what empathy is like? You know, usually empathy within society is actually the definition of empathy is looking through someone else's eyes or standing in someone else's shoes. So not using those metaphors, but just coming up with your own metaphor. Do you have a metaphor of what empathy is like to you personally?
You know, I think that I have a couple. I think one of them would be, you know, this emotional spell checker, which is to say something within you that gives you a check, an auto check on what emotional reaction you're going to have towards another person. There's something in you that says what you're about to say or do is going to have an effect on other people. So what's going to stop me from being just reactive instead of being responsive is, I think, what empathy is. I also think that empathy is kind of like a a periscope into other people's heart. And I think that it gives us an opportunity to see yourself in other people, because you know, actually my wife brought up a very interesting story today that I never really thought of, and it's a really esoteric example. But the fact is that we were under the impression that someone that was in a position to get tickets for us to a show because of the relationship that we had with them was something that it was strange that it didn't happen, and all we did was simply model the scenario with the tables completely turned and realized how absurd it was of us to have had any expectation at all. And so I think that empathy is kind of like this aspect of a person that gives them an opportunity to feel what it would be like to be on the other end of what you're putting out.
Yeah, so it's that spell checker. The spell checker is saying, stop, how are my actions affecting the other person?
Exactly.
And then it says, well, this needs to be changed.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of gets highlighted in red if it perhaps is going to hurt the other person. Or,
you know, I'm reminded of like, look, I don't know that Mother Teresa drives a car, but if for some reason you were behind Mother Teresa in a car and she went from the going straight lane into the left lane and did it in such a way that was very irritating to you because you meant to try to get into that left lane and maybe there's a little bit of a cut you off kind of thing, and you're the kind of person that doesn't have empathy, you might be also the kind of person that would do an age-old reaction, which I'm not going to talk about right now, but that aggressive reaction is something that you might have as a reflex. But the fact is that whatever the cause is for what a person does something is unknown to you until you give yourself a chance to find out what causes the behaviors of the other person. And that's what we hope to actually be doing with AOK, is that people are sharing details about some very mundane things that are happening that are either really great or that could have been great, and that people have a little bit of a missed opportunity about it. But to be able to get to know what was on people's minds where they weren't really sharing the information before because it just wasn't really a forum for it, not only does that give us insight into other people and what makes them operate, but also it gives me a diary of all the things that I've now done so I can see how I've been progressing as a person towards empathy. And that's the part that we're really excited about when it comes to this Ashoka Challenge, because we do see that we've got this AOK Ambassador program, which is designed to empower kids and students, I should really say students, not kids, empower students with the ability to bring an experience like this to their own school. And in doing so, there's some opportunities for them to become even more involved in the leadership of it as well. That's what the program allows for. But we just see it as being an opportunity for people to start understanding what's going on in fellow students' daily lives that they hadn't had an opportunity to know of in the past.
So how does that work? How you, I mean, if empathy is kind of seeing, empathy comes from the, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but from the German word einfühlen, which means to feel your way into someone else, or even into a work of art. So it's feeling into. So in a sense, you're wanting to feel yourself into someone else's experience, kind of go beyond the superficial maybe, and see
right.
what's kind of causing. So how does your game kind of facilitate that going deeper into someone else's experience?
Because I think that never before has there been a place where someone felt like it was the right forum to say something as simple as someone online at the coffee shop today didn't have 50 cents to complete a transaction, and I was there and I gave them the 50 cents, because it just seems so small and so mundane that when it gets posted on AOK with a series of different features that showcase what that act is or what that observation might have been, because maybe I just saw someone else do it and it's not the kind of thing I would ordinarily talk about. Well, what that does is that gives me insight into that particular user's what they care about and what they respect and what touches them and what moves them. And as a result, these are those small moments that we just typically let go. But now what we're doing is we have a place that it's okay to share, and it's an okay place to enjoy the conversation that comes after that. So on a mechanical level, it's that I post this act or observation, and then all of a sudden I noticed that 5 people, they liked it. They actually clicked the like button on it. Or maybe one person put a comment out that said, I've been struggling with the same thing, or I had seen the same thing, or I did the same thing. And then all of a sudden you see a whole dialogue that occurs. And because AOK is a fully transparent world, there's no opportunity for anyone to do what's called predatory communication, where you have someone that's, earmarking someone else. It's all transparent to the community. And with the oversight that we have, even if someone were doing something that's against our community guidelines, we'd be able to flag it, we'd be able to catch it. But so the idea is that we now are in a place where I've done something or I've seen something, and someone else has validated it by giving it the thumbs up. Someone else has said, hey, that's really cool, it reminds me of such and such, and you get the list of comments that then go after that. And then I have an opportunity to see what other people are posting, because not unlike on Facebook, once you post to something, you get reminded of you get an email telling you that someone else has posted to that feed. So, and there are other ways that we incentivize more of this too, because for those that are a little bit more leadership driven or that are a little bit more proactive about doing a campaign, we have a way that's called a flash tag, which is not unlike the way that Twitter's hashtag works, which allows people to create a campaign and rally everyone around a particular theme. And any posts that include a tag that has an asterisk in front of it will cascade down that same page, and that page can be customized. And then that page can also compete for the donation money that goes out each month. So it gives some people just like to post the day-to-day, empathetic things that they see or do. Other people like to actually try to create a whole campaign around it. And then there's levels that go along with that recognize the efforts and recognize the body of work that people have done. So it really is giving people a look into a side of humanity that I think they hadn't really had an opportunity to in the past.
So are you saying that the game is a space for people to post what positive actions that they've done, and then people can respond to those positive actions, so those socially positive actions?
And yeah, all of that and their observations, because sometimes it's not us that's doing the action, but we've been touched by something we've seen. So that's an observation. And then all of that winds up feeding to a map. So even as yours winds up dropping in a map based on what your zip code is, you could see all the other AOKs that are happening around the world, and you can hone in on the map, and you can see which communities are more AOK than others. And so, that's another feature. We have another really great feature that we're looking to implement that's going to, we hope, show how people get inspired by other people. We're calling it the butterfly effect of good, or the wave. And what that's meant to do is collect the data that as someone does an act of kindness and someone else is inspired by it, they'll be connected by choice. And then what we'll be able to do is graph how a cause and effect relationship that one person did can sprinkle out or spread out into, you know, many, many other acts of kindness.
So, yeah, so if you do an act of kindness, you can see how it's affecting others, and you can see, hey, I did this, and it actually has a wider ripple effect. It's affecting other people, encouraging others. So it sounds like the game is geared around the kind of acts of kindness model then, kind of like the random acts of kindness, and kind of building on that kind of
yeah, quite a bit. I mean, you know, we're calling it a new kind of kind. That's one of our tag phrases, only because we just don't think that it's simply only the earnest version of kind that we're all accustomed to seeing, that it's really more about making it something that people will do because it's fun and that it's kind of cool for students to do. And we have just observed that this type of proactive behavior to both act and observe kindness is causing people to become more mindful, which causes people to become more empathetic.
Well, kind of what I'm looking at, I mean, that the kindness approach has been around for a while, you know, random acts of kindness. And I'm trying to like organize around the value of empathy, you know, kind of create a new, you know, narrative or a new kind of a value. And so one thing I'm looking at, you know, everybody, if I ask people about their values, everybody has a different value that they kind of organize around. You know, my partner, hers is integrity, mine's empathy, you know, yours might be kindness. And it becomes a central value that, but it seems to me that empathy is kind of like this value that's kind of needed in society now, and kind of create a dialogue around it. And it's also seems to be a source of morality. So it's got a lot of, you know, important features to it in terms of promoting it as a value. And I think that's why Ashoka is doing it, because they've come to that realization as well. And so in terms of, I guess where am I going with this, is that one thing I've seen in terms of a dynamic that would be really interesting is, what are your blocks to creating a culture of empathy? In the sense that to say, to having, I don't know, I'm just, in terms of a game, it's like, so that you can share what your problems are with this vision, this goal that you're working towards. I don't know, do you have something like that where you're kind of like saying, here's the problem, and then people say, well, here we're going to hear what your problem is. So we're going to empathize with you. So you're kind of receiving empathy, as well as, you know, here's some ideas of maybe how to handle that problem.
Is the question something along the lines of, what are the challenges to creating a culture of empathy?
Yeah, it would be along those lines. Yeah, what are the challenges, and how do we kind of express those challenges, and how do we overcome those challenges?
Well, I wish I had all those answers.
I'm asking a lot. I'm sorry.
What I do think, just in my own experience, coming from a content industry of, you know, from Hollywood, and now seeing in the space that I'm in, which I guess is considered to be the socially good media space, and I find that there's a great deal of interest to create content that's designed to be more socially mindful, that's designed to be more geared towards empathy. And yet, the biggest challenge is, do people want to tune in to a show that's about empathy? And I think that one of the challenges is that we still very much belong to a culture that is seeking the low-hanging fruit of entertainment, escapism entertainment, and that's a tough thing to overcome. And so similarly, when you go to say, we're going to put structures in place, be it a game, be it education or content, and that is going to be designed to incite more empathy, I think that what you wind up facing in all of those areas is whether or not people are going to be engaged enough by whatever that structure is. And so I think that fortunately, there are a lot of really smart people And I'm not sure that I'm one of them yet, because I think it remains to be seen whether or not some of the aspects of AOK will in fact do what we hope it to do. But we're seeing a lot of smart people that are making use of things that kids or students really do like to do, and bringing them more towards an understanding of empathy through that route. And it reminds me of the philosopher Kierkegaard from the 1800s, who in Denmark, when his society was so decadent, and he was a religious philosopher, he found the best way to get people to be conscious of some of the issues that that confronted the religious philosopher, and someone that needs to get to a place of accepting a God, is to generate writing that was very engaging. I mean, Diary of a Seducer is a wonderful piece of work that, if you didn't know you were actually being subjected to what it means to have the despair of godlessness, you would just think you were reading an incarnation of a vampire story of some kind. I mean, it's a very similar paradigm. And I think that that's the biggest challenge for people today, educators, for entertainers, for game makers, that if we're going to try to bring about a much more healthy society, that we embrace people more. And this is actually, there's another example of this, is Tom Shadyac in his movie I Am. Discusses this, and he was, behind some of the biggest blockbuster movies that were lacking in anything that would be described as empathy. And this wonderful documentary that he made speaks to his revelation and why he decided to go about now making content that's going to bring about that empathy consciousness. So it's a big challenge, but I think that more and more smart people are taking it on.
Yeah, well, when I ask people how do we build a culture of empathy, something that's come up is the dialogue, is just starting kind of these type of dialogues, even just thinking about it, even posing the questions, and just start kicking it around a little bit like we're doing here. So, I don't have all the answers. I don't expect you to have all the answers. But I think that whole question, I mean, it's really central. You really hit, for me, a central question is how do we make it so engaging and not just entertaining, but so meaningful that people will want to watch. Like on TV, I mean, the reality shows are pretty much based on judgment, people competing, being judged, being demeaned, and it's somehow entertaining to do that. And all it does is reinforce this whole, this whole value system of judgment.
On the flip side of it, though, some of the other very successful reality shows that embrace empathy would be, Extreme Makeover, or would be even Undercover Boss, shows that are showing people what it means to be in other people's shoes, or showing people what it means to lend a hand to someone else. And they're incredibly popular. And I think that they're, I'm not going to say that they're, sterling entertainment by any means. I don't watch either of the shows very regularly, but I have seen them enough to know that there still is a way to convey empathy and to convey what it means to walk in other people's shoes in an entertaining way.
Yeah,
it's our challenge. It's that there will probably always be some kind of a market for just drivel entertainment, but I think the market for entertainment that has a greater effect on society towards a more empathetic culture is on the rise.
Yeah, well, it's the chick flicks, right? That is kind of the personal relationships, and there's a bit of a narrative of, coming together, kind of some kind of a crisis, overcoming the crisis, another crisis, and then overcoming that. And so that has a certain appeal. So it's really, I mean, I'm really kind of getting to this notion of what is it that really is engaging. Is that emotional engagement that people will really want to say, wow, I really want to see this and be engaged in this. And it's something that's deepening connection between people.
Yeah.
And it's not, didactic or, whatever, or, so.
It's a tough thing to do. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of really, we're familiar with an organization called One Economy that provides broadband access to low-income families, and then once that broadband access is delivered, for free, they're given a portal where they can get a lot of great educational tools and ways to become more effective in this economy. And they were smart to take the route of conveying some of the life lessons in the form of entertainment, and they created a number of webisodes that are so well done and so deep in the way that a person can identify with these characters. And I think that that's actually the real great lesson that's learned, is that on the one hand, yes, chick flicks, if that's what we're going to use as the phrase for them. Some people call them romantic comedies or rom-coms. You know, those types of films, I think, are on the nose about what we're talking about. But really, the experience of any movie is capable of giving someone an opportunity to live vicariously. In fact, isn't that what the famous scene in Hamlet's all about? When the king winds up seeing the depiction of his murdering of his brother. I think that it's a natural response to film to already be using the empathy muscle to put yourself in the character shoes that you're watching. So at that point, if you have people already engaged in that way and your content is then capable of conveying something that is engaging, there are many movies that I think are able to raise consciousness towards empathy without necessarily seeming like a romantic comedy. I mean, I'm reminded of just even one very, it's a salacious movie, but at the same time, it just opens the door to thinking about people's lives in a different way. It's, I think it's called The Secretary, where you wind up seeing a relationship that most people would say is aberrant in the sexual dynamics that these two people engage in. But at the same time, through seeing every aspect of what these two people are about and the humanity of each individual, you can start to appreciate that they are really perfect for each other. And there's something about the way that we understand them now that we could appreciate why it is that they are attracted to each other. And I think that that's essentially what I'm saying, is that if the filmmaking really delivers humanity, then I think the empathetic messages can be conveyed.
Yeah, so really focus on the humanity and making it so that people can really see the deeper qualities of what's going on with the characters, and kind of move into identifying and
exactly,
yeah, more deeply. And so it sounds like you're kind of working on the game aspect of this now. Like how do you apply gaming to create this dynamic? And
right. Right. I mean, I think that actually the part that gets the, I guess we're just calling it the empathy muscle, but I don't think that's what we really want to call it. This is really a neurological thing, is the social networking aspects of it. It's the gaming aspects that motivate people to do it more frequently, but it's the social networking features within our community that start to reward the feelings, the oxytocin-like feelings of what you've done in the real world, which already is a feel-good experience, to then getting acknowledgement for what you've done. And I think that experience where you are comfortable enough to share something that you did that you felt good about, and you don't have to be embarrassed about where you're sharing that, because it's not every place that people are aggregating online that sharing some of this stuff is commonly accepted, but it's becoming more and more. And then knowing that other people are appreciating it and validating it. That's just another way that the community, and this is of course what we're talking about when we say that the web and the way that people are relating now in social networks is probably one of the greatest tools to achieve the empathy. And when you're talking about the fusion as opposed to the, the fission, the fusion versus fission.
Yeah, so it sounds like well, you mentioned oxytocin, and oxytocin is, as we empathize with each other and connect more deeply with each other, our bodies release oxytocin, which is this neuropeptide hormone that kind of creates a calming effect. It's that warmth that we get. So you're wanting to create games that create connection between people.
It's that we want to create games that bring people to the community that has the experience, the social networking experience that draws out the oxytocin.
So it's oxytocin generating
yes
game.
exactly.
That's cool. Well, great. Well, this is I think the games has such potential, you know, for creating empathy, and just finding the right combination, the right game could do so much, you know, since games are so popular and seem to be rising in popularity. So
Thank you.
hoping, you know, for good things, you know, for the development of what you're doing. So we've gone for almost an hour. Is there any kind of topic around empathy that you'd like to share before, you know, that you feel we haven't quite touched on?
Well, have you seen other efforts towards bringing about a more empathetic culture that have made you hopeful that this is something that we're seeing a trend towards?
Well, what came to me initially, just when you said that, is kind of a dynamics, and I think it's conflict resolution. I know Facebook, they had a conference on compassion, and they were looking at, you know, Facebook is dealing with, you know, so many people, almost 1 billion people, and there's plenty of conflicts there. So it's like someone will post a photograph and then somebody else doesn't like it. And it's like, you know, they ask Facebook, you know, to complain about it and all that. So they started looking at tools for conflict resolution, and one of the ideas was to have a series of buttons saying, this picture makes me feel, you know, angry, embarrassed.
Interesting.
So they're having tools for expressing your emotions. And they say that just that quality, that instead of somebody saying, take that thing off, it's like, this is making me feel this. And when the other person can see how it's making that person feel, that they will, you know, 80% of the time just take it off, because they're seeing how their actions are affecting someone through these, you know, through these little icons. That's
fascinating. It reminds me a great deal of work that gets done in relationship therapy, where I know that one of the primary tools that gets used in conflict resolution within relationship therapy is that there's this, we are taught, and I think that this is going to change over time, but we've been taught for so long to identify what it is about someone else that's bothering us, or what about someone else makes us feel hurt, and we don't say that hurt what you did. We don't admit what our emotional reaction is to what the action was first. And I think that more often than not, especially because if you're talking about relationships where people already care about each other, if your first reaction is to say, hey, you know, that thing that you did really did hurt me, it immediately puts the other person in a position to understand how they've affected someone else. And I think that type of dialoguing, I think you're right. I think that once people are more trained to be verbal about how they feel instead of what they take umbrage with, I think that will really be a big help. And, you know, there's one other thing that I just observed when you talk about conflict resolution. I mean, the movie that just came out that the Weinstein brothers released called The Bully, it's called Bully now. It was called The Bully Project for a little while. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I haven't.
It's a very well done movie, and one of the things that seems to be the underlying one of the underlying themes of the movie is, what are we as school administrators going to do to fix this problem? And I think that it's unfortunate that we've grown into a culture over time that we expect people to be able to administer cultural change or administer empathy culture, and it's just not going to work that way. And whereas the movie showcases some people who have very, very like passionate views about what we need to do to eliminate bullying. Even just this term anti-bullying to me feels combative. I think that it really should just be bully awareness, or it should be, maybe we look for the positive word of bully. But I think that whereas my knee-jerk at first was to align myself and feel a little bit less empathetic towards the people that are that impassioned about how to resolve bullying, I now have decided and now know that I think that because there is no one single answer, that it's literally just what you're doing here with this program and what is actually happening organically in the schools, the conversations that are occurring, the fact that there are some people that are pushing the envelope and they're saying things that need to be done that are very aggressive, and some people are not on that camp, but the whole thing, which is this dialogue that's occurring where people are actually saying what they feel about it, is where the resolution will come. And I think that just this awareness that does come to the schools over the course of time, a lot of this is just going to be cultural shifting.
Are you saying that you feel all the voices need to be heard and held?
Yeah, I think that everyone that has an emotional reaction to an issue that we would like to see get resolved should feel like there's a forum to express that reaction, that emotion. So yeah, and I do think that that is becoming more and more common and embraced in the school system.
Yeah, so there was the one factor about the icons. You could choose which emotion. That seems to be part of it. It's just kind of giving me the idea of having a set of tools that help you express where you are.
Yeah.
There are some games out there that are like cards where you have the emotion that you're feeling, and it's sort of like a crutch to kind of help you to put out the card of, well, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. So it kind of helps you to share where you are and give you tools to help you share your kind of inner feelings.
That's great. I think that's fantastic. Did they say in this program that you were a part of that this feature on Facebook is rolling out, or are they just talking about it as a possibility?
I think it was actually rolling out. I haven't seen it, but it was. There's a person in charge of compassion in can't remember his name right now, but in Facebook, that kind of put on this conference. So it's his full-time job to do this. And I talked to him, and he was like just totally into the conflict resolution. Really getting into the nuances of how do you actually create the tools for this conflict resolution.
Well, look at any blog online, and if you look at anywhere where there's an opportunity to comment about almost anything that has the potential to polarize points of view, they will almost always be a place where people deteriorate to name calling.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the same effect that happens when you're in traffic, is that we are not tapped into the fact that the people that we're commenting on are other human beings. That when you're online, the temptation to look at that person as being nothing more than the representation of the text, as opposed to the fact that there's a real human being back there, I think makes us a little bit more irresponsible. So I think it's really great to have the opportunity for people to express their feelings in that way. And I'm not surprised that as an organization as powerful and as effective as Facebook now does have someone in charge of compassion. And we are actually on our game AOK, we are partnering with the Charter for Compassion, which is Karen Armstrong's organization that's designed to bring to action how a person can become more compassionate. And I'm just curious, what do you see as the difference between compassion and empathy?
For me, compassion is empathy applied to suffering. I mean, there's also a lot of kind of confusion around even the word empathy, what empathy means. But for me, empathy is like 4 parts. It's self-empathy, which is kind of mindfulness, self-awareness. It's just being aware of what's going on in your body. And even that quality is being able to articulate, say, oh, I'm feeling pain, I'm feeling joy, and all the nuances of what we're feeling. And then there's mirrored empathy, which is through mirror neurons. So as I'm seeing you right now, I saw a slight shaking of your head. So within me, my body through mirror neurons is mirroring that, and I'm moving my hands all over. So you're kind of mirroring that in your body. And so that's kind of mirrored empathy through mirror neurons. And then there's, and that's sometimes called affective or emotional empathy, but I just like the word mirrored. And then there's imaginative empathy, which is it's also in in the scientific literature they call it perspective taking and cognitive empathy, but it's really being able to kind of imaginatively take the position, know all the things that are going on behind something, someone's decision to do something. So, and seeing what the world looks like from their perspective. And I think that's what acting is all about. It's like, as an actor, you give someone, you say, okay, your husband's just died, you're in this situation, now go act it. And,
right.
and people just jump into the role. You know, it's amazing humanity, how it has that capacity just innate to do that acting. And then the fourth part is what I would call empathic action. So that as we know and see each other, you know, kind of more deeply, that we kind of take the appropriate action to work together in kind of a smooth, harmonic way that kind of carries the other person inside of us. So that there's, and I've seen that in conflict resolution, where, you know, the parties are really mad at each other and they're arguing. And then you do this empathic, you know, listening to them, you get them to empathize. And then it's like, what do we do now after they've made that connection? And it's like, well, we'll meet, you know, once a week for dinner on this day and this day. And they start negotiating the actions that they will take with each other. And that negotiation is what I would call empathic action, so that it's this smooth action where everything is kind of brought into, you know, the wholeness of both parties. So that's kind of like an extensive, you know, kind of definition that I use of empathy.
That's that is definitely the most thought out and clear definition of empathy that I've ever heard, and it was really, really educational. Thank you.
Yes, I've been kind of merging all these different definitions, and that's kind of the operating definition that I kind of have, you know, for the time being. It's still evolving, and there's a lot of nuances and all that.
I hope you're writing about it.
What?
I hope you're writing about it.
Yeah, I'm going to make some videos. That's actually how it's really great to talk to you, because you're coming from that Hollywood film, you know, background. That's kind of what I was looking at, was making a documentary about empathy. And that's how I kind of got into this. And it was like, well, you need so much funding. I'll create a website and create a cause. So I still would like to make that documentary.
Well, you're creating the content towards the goal. So the good news is a lot of the legwork that would be required to make a film is probably already being done right now. And so you're getting some great perspectives. And that's a great deal of what I think empathy is about, as well, is getting people's point of view on it. So I think that it's taking action at all is essentially what we're all expecting to happen here. Is what we're all looking to have happen. Is that, yes, if you could very easily make a movie, that'd be one thing. But this is a wonderful journey that you're on. And I thank you, by the way, for inviting me and for commenting on our submission at Ashoka.
Yeah. You can see I love to talk, so these things kind of go on for a long time. People say, oh, they should be a little bit shorter, but we can always cut and edit pieces out of it. So, yeah, so it was great talking to you, and, you know, I hope we can keep in contact, because I'm in contact with the, you know, Charter for Compassion folks as well. And, you know, if we can all, I think part of building a culture of empathy is get us all networked together, and that's what I kind of see this is about, so...
Well, I'll look you up. Are you on LinkedIn?
I'm LinkedIn, Facebook, all over.
We'll start there, and we'll keep emailing. I really enjoyed this.
Okay, it was a real pleasure, too. So,
all right.
Okay, thanks, Ira.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.